Welcome to another episode of our video series of the critique of modern systems.
It's good to be here.
How are you doing? Ready for this one?
I am. This is a heavy topic we're tackling today. The sources are incredibly dense.
They really are. We're looking at the architecture of modern power, how rhetoric works, and how that's led to this breakdown of, well, reality itself.
Exactly. We're examining the very structure of influence, how it's exerted. It's not just about current events. It's about the foundational theories that let our world function or malfunction the way it does.
Right. And our goal today is to really pull out the key threads for you, the listener. We want to trace this line from ancient politics all the way to, the cultural critiques we see in movies today.
To really get a handle on the mechanics of it all.
So let's start with something the source material really emphasizes, a distinction about the political class. We tend to think of politics as just another job.
But it's not. Not at all.
It's something different.
Fundamentally different. It's not a profession in the way being a doctor or a plumber is. It's an identity. A total commitment. Some might call it a vocation.
A vocation. So it's driven by something more than a paycheck.
Oh, absolutely. It's driven by a powerful worldview, a very specific kind of ambition, and this constant quest for influence. Most people are, wrapped up in their daily lives, their families, their work.
Just getting by.
Exactly. The politician, on the other hand, is living in this continuous drama of power and systemic control. Their life is that identity. And while it's theoretically for the public good, the reality is that just sustaining that identity often becomes the main goal.
The civic duty part gets a bit lost.
It can, yes. The system sort of sustains itself.
And what's incredible is that the tools for sustaining it, they haven't really changed. Let's talk about rhetoric.
It's amazing, isn't it? The core tactics of political rhetoric are virtually unchanged since Aristotle, despite all our technology.
We like to think of political debate as, a battle of ideas. Of facts and data.
And that's the illusion. The sources are very clear on this. Political rhetoric is the art of persuasion. And often, that just means the art of deception. It's designed to hit the limbic system.
The emotional center of the brain.
Yes. It's meant to bypass logic, bypass intellect, bypass any kind of evidence. It goes straight for fear, for hope, for that sense of belonging. It's primal.
Okay, so if politicians are always targeting emotion, not reason, that feels like a fragile foundation for society. Let's trace how that power shifted over time before the modern politician who held that kind of authority.
Well, historically, that unquestionable power belonged to religious institutions. The church in the Middle Ages is the classic example. Their authority was, divine, flawless.
Until science started asking questions. I'm thinking Galileo.
Galileo is the perfect turning point. He says, the world turns. And for stating a fact that countered the official narrative, he's put under house arrest. That was the crack in the foundation.
And then the Renaissance, the Reformation, starts to gain ground.
It does. But here's the crucial part, the transfer of power. In our modern world, politicians have essentially replaced the clergy. They've stepped into that role as the source of societal truth and framing. They inherited that mantle of control.
But their promises are different. It's not salvation in the afterlife.
No, it's salvation here and now. They use secular tools. They promise economic prosperity, national security, a stable future built on supposedly rational ideas.
But you're saying even science, the thing that broke the church's power, gets co-opted by this new system.
It absolutely does. Look at the history of major scientific breakthroughs. So many of them are first leveraged for defense, for warfare.
Can you give an example?
Well, think about GPS or nuclear technology. These weren't developed for, helping you find a coffee shop or for clean energy initially. They were tools of power for military superiority. They're only later repackaged for civilian use. The core driver is almost always power and control.
So, if power is maintained by directing emotion and co-opting science for security, it makes sense that the next step is to manufacture a reason to unify all those emotions.
Exactly. This is where you get into mass psychology. And one of the oldest tricks in the book is creating a shared external enemy.
The sources say this isn't a new idea. It goes back decades.
To the early 1950s, at least, the sources point to this recurring headline, this idea of a catastrophic threat from outside.
Like a meteor hitting the Earth.
Precisely. something cosmic and unstoppable. The point wasn't always that a meteor was actually coming. The point was the utility of the threat.
What does that do psychologically?
It creates instant global cohesion. It makes all our internal conflicts, our wars, our politics seem petty and small. It forces everyone to look to a central authority for salvation from this common enemy. It's a powerful tool for social engineering.
This constant manipulation of the narrative, it feels like it leads directly to where we are now, to this post-truth condition.
It's the inevitable outcome. Post-truth is what happens when people lose faith in all the institutions that are supposed to deliver truth. They can no longer grasp what is objectively real.
And in simple terms, that means what?
It means perception replaces fact. It's not about what's true anymore, it's about what feels true.
And in a world with no central gatekeepers, no single source of news?
Right. Truth shatters into a million pieces. You have all these separate pools of information, these bubbles, and inside each bubble, perception is reality. The objective truth gets crushed under the weight of all these competing perceptions.
This feels different from old school propaganda, though.
It is critically different. With propaganda, the manipulators knew they were lying. They knew the truth they were hiding. In a post-truth world, the system is so chaotic, so algorithmic, that even the people doing the manipulation can lose the plot.
They start believing their own stories.
They get caught in their own web. Everyone does. The line just blurs completely.
We can see this playing out in culture, too. The film Don't Look Up really hit a nerve because it's basically a perfect satire of this entire dynamic.
It's such a potent film because it nails every single element. You have the absurd political leader. You have the celebrity/tech mogul who's this new form of power broker.
A PR character.
Exactly. And it shows how this catastrophic, undeniable reality, a comet hurtling toward Earth, is instantly turned into a commodity, a political football.
It also goes after the academics, the experts.
Oh, absolutely. The opportunist professor who gets a taste of fame and just becomes part of the circus. One day he's an astronomer, the next he's on a morning show talking about, I don't know, celebrity relationships.
He loses all credibility.
He becomes an entertainer. His expertise is secondary, which is a perfect commentary on our media environment.
The film just creates this overwhelming feeling of distrust. A sea of distrust, as the sources put it. You don't trust the government, the media, the military.
It's the panopticon, this sense that you're always being watched, always being monetized. I mean, think of that detail in the film, the one about the generals charging for snacks in the White House.
Right, that nothing is free.
It's a brilliant satirical point.
Yeah.
It says that in a system this broken, everything is transactional. There is no space outside of the market, outside of that control.
To really understand this, though, we need to go deeper than just a film critique. You argue we have to look at the philosophy that basically predicted all of this. You point to Jean Baudrillard.
You have to. You simply have to. He was writing about this in the 1970s. He wasn't just a sociologist. He was a futurist. He gave us the language to understand the simulated world we now live in.
So what are his key ideas?
Well, the most famous is simulacra and simulation. It's this idea of a hyperreality, a world where the copy, the simulation, has become more real than the original.
The map has replaced the territory.
Precisely. We no longer interact with reality just with its signs and symbols. And then you have concepts like the transparency of evil, his argument that being good takes constant effort, while corruption is easy, it's the default state.
And he also wrote about consumerism. That seems very relevant.
Yes, his critique of the consumer society is central. He saw this hedonistic world where we're just endlessly consuming, where production only exists to fuel more consumption. Everything, even our own identity, becomes a commodity to be bought and sold.
So Baudrillard basically drew the blueprint for the post-truth world decades ago.
He mapped the decay before it happened, and it proves that you can't understand concepts like post-truth or the metaverse just by looking at technology. The real answers are in philosophy, in sociology. He gave us the toolkit 50 years ago.
So we covered a lot of ground, the timeless nature of political rhetoric, the shift of power from the church to the state, and this slide into a post-truth world where perception is everything. And we need thinkers like Baudrillard to even have the words to describe it.
It's an unsettling picture, but it's essential to understand the system we're in.
It really is.
And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final question. It's drawn from a proverb that's referenced in the source material, the same one that Don't Look Up is built around. The idea that when the world is ending, people are still busy with trivial things.
Choosing not to look up.
Right. So the question is this. Is that choice born of ignorance? Or is it something deeper? In a post-truth world where truth is crushed and every action feels simulated and maybe meaningless, is choosing comfort, choosing triviality. Is that actually the only logical response left? Something for you to think about?